Hi, this is Elena Kraus and welcome to another Hero Arts video. In this video, I will show you how to make these cards using the Christmas poster background stamp and different white inks and white embossing powder depending on the look you want to achieve on your cards. So let's get started. For the first one, I'm using white embossing powder and Versamark ink. So I'm rubbing that anti-static powder onto my black layering paper from the Midnight collection. And I'm inking my stamp with Versamark. And then I'm just putting the paper on top of the stamp. I find this method easiest when it comes to backgrounds that are wood mounted. And then I'm just applying the white embossing powder to cover nicely that the whole image. And then just removing the excess that kind of stuck where it should not have. Next, I'll use my heat tool to melt that embossing powder. So my background is larger than I want to be for my card, so at the end I'll trim that. So I'm moving to the second background, and here I'm using white dye ink for more subtle white onto the black cardstock. So here's that black, that white, and it will, when it dries completely, it will fade a little bit. And for the third one, I'm using the Unicorn Pigment ink. So this is kind of white in between the white embossing powder and the white dye ink. So you will see the difference at the end when we compare all the cards. So I'm just heat setting this one. The pigment ink dries slower. So I'm heat setting it so I don't smear that ink. So next I'm using the Santa faces, and I'll just stamp a bunch of those and color them. So here you see I stamp several of those. I'll be using only 3 of those. So here's the 3 that I'll be using, and I'm using some chameleon pens and color tops to color those in. So I'm just moving quickly on the coloring. And I'm using few shades of red. I'm using burgundy and coral red for the hats, and then some gray for the beards, just to have a little bit more to add a little bit depth to that white for the beard. And I'm using some of the skin tones for his face and the nose. For the nose I use coral red. So I'm just moving quickly, and then I'm adding some Versamark ink using Microtip. This is like for makeup basically, but it's easy to apply some Versamark ink onto the hat and then emboss it with sparkle embossing powder. So here I'm already coloring the other 2 Santas that I want to use. So I'm going through the same process. For the one on the left, instead of the coral red, I use the crimson red. So it's kind of more brighter red on top of the Santa's head. And then I'm repeating the same process for coloring the faces and the beard with grays and skin tones. As well for the hat, I'm using the same gray. It's a neutral gray 5. So you notice I start from the middle because I want that like on top to be white, so I'm going from the middle down to get that gray tone and add a little bit depth to the white areas of my images. So now we're done, and I'm adding again that Versamark ink using the Microtip applicator. And I'm adding some sparkle embossing powder. So next I'll just heat set those quickly. So next what I'm doing, I'm just cutting those Santas very close to the edge. So we're almost done here. I kind of sped up the process, so you're not bored of me cutting for 10 minutes. So this is the last Santa. Well, Santa's head actually. So next, I'm looking how it looks against my background, and then I decided to use one of the circle framelits to cut some snow layering paper to mat the Santa heads, and a little strip of the blush layering paper, the darkest hue. So I'm stamping Merry Christmas. And then I'm adding white embossing powder, and I'll heat set that one. So I'm just trimming the sides. So I think that looks good, and now I'm trimming that background to 3 3/4 by 5, and layering it onto the darkest hue of the blush note cards. I'm using some fun foam, black fun foam, to adhere that layer onto my note card to add some dimension. I'm adhering the little circle, and then using the mounting foam adhesive, I'll add the Santa and the little sentiment. So you will see this was the white emboss, and it's very bright. It kind of stands out, and you get that kind of more dramatic look compared to the other backgrounds that we stamped. And I'm adding some red Nuva drops. So now let's move on to the other two that were stamped with ink that were not embossed. So I'm again stamping that Merry Christmas sentiment, and I'll emboss both of them with white embossing powder. Trim those. And here are my other two backgrounds. One of the left is with the pigment ink. It's kind of brighter than the dye ink. And I'll trim those two to 5 by 3 3/4. And then I'll adhere them to the note cards, again using the fun foam. And I'll use the mounting tape to adhere the Santas and the little sentiments. So there's the Santa. I'm adding the mounting foam on the back, and then a little bit mounting foam on the back of the sentiment, and adhere that one. I'm repeating the same process for the last card, and I use a little bit different Santa here. And then repeating the same process for the sentiment and adhering that. So for the dye ink, the background with the dye ink, I added white embellishments because the background is more subtle, and for the other one I added the red Nuva drops. So here are a little close-up of all the backgrounds, so you can decide which one you want to go for depending on the look you like, and go from there. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the Hero Arts YouTube channel and visit the blog for more ideas and inspiration. Bye!